Good afternoon, everyone. The topic of my presentation today is Vajrayana practices towards scientific conceptualization of meditation. And I will try to show that it's very important to include Vajrayana into scientific consideration and research on meditation. I will break down my presentation into two parts, and I will record them separately. And in the first part, I will talk about neurophysiological correlates of Vajrayana practices and how they different from Theravada and Mahayana practices. And in the second part, I will talk more about advanced meditation practices such as Tummo and Mahamudra. Scientific research so far has tended to study Buddhist meditation outside of its cultural and religious context. And unfortunately, not many researchers in psychology and neuroscience recognize that Buddhism is not a homogeneous tradition, but has three branches, three vehicles, such as Theravada or Hinayana, Mahayana, and Vajrayana, which are not the same in terms of either their philosophy or their practices. Most scientific studies on meditation so far have been largely limited to very specific types of shamatha and vipassana meditations from Theravada and Mahayana Buddhist traditions. These meditations are relatively simple to master by the general population without religious background, and this is probably why they are the most studied types of meditation. A large body of studies was also conducted on mindfulness. Most scientific knowledge of meditation, including current conceptualization and existing categorization of meditative practices, comes from scientific experiments on these relatively simple types of meditation. Meanwhile, more culturally complex practices, such as the mind-body practices of Vajrayana, predominant Tibetan and Himalayan Buddhist tradition, have received much less scientific attention. I will give a brief overview of three Buddhist traditions and their main practices. First is Theravada, the oldest branch of Buddhism, which follows the meditative forest tradition. Its meditative practices aim at calming and pacifying the mind, and their vipassana, being mindful of the content of attention as it wanders, and contemporary mindfulness shares many common elements with vipassana. And then we have shamatha, one-pointed concentration or calm concentration. Mahayana, second tradition, it incorporates unique philosophy and a set of religious practices in addition to what is practiced by Theravada. Its main meditative practices are quite similar to Theravada practices. They also aim at calming the mind and include both shamatha and vipassana, as well as Japanese Zen, Chinese Chen, and other practices. And finally, Vajrayana, Tibetan Tantric Buddhism, which is an esoteric Buddhist tradition. While it is generally accepted that Vajrayana philosophy evolved out of Mahayana in medieval India, Vajrayana practices evolved under the diverse influences such as Hindu Tantra, and they're quite different from those of Theravada and Mahayana. First of all, they are mind-body tantric practices, and they involve both body and mind. They aim at enhancing the mind and realization of its awake quality, not pacifying or calming the mind as in Theravada or Mahayana. David talked in his video about different classes of Vajrayana meditations, so I will mention them briefly here. In addition to a variety of preliminary practices, we have three main classes or stages of Vajrayana meditations. The first one, generation, creation, or development stages. Gyaltsen Rinpoche in his video refers to these practices as kirim. These practices are often referred to as visualization practices. The goal of these practices is to purify perception, according to Vajrayana. During these practices, one engages in meditation upon one's guru or visualizing oneself as a particular meditation deity, yidam in Tibetan. Few times when I talked about these practices in my presentations, there was a surprise in the audience, which seemed to be based on an assumption that Buddhist practice is comprised entirely of non-conceptual practices, formless and non-conceptual practices. This somewhat naive idea about Buddhism is apparently still popular enough even in scientific community. And as both Gyaltsen and Wangchuk Rinpoche noted in their videos, any completion stages, stages with sign or without sign, practices cannot be performed without generation stages. The second class of practices is called completion stages with signs, or completion stages with characteristics. These are subtle body yoga practices, advanced practices aimed at heightening energies of the body. Tummo is one of these practices, and dream yoga is another example. And finally, completion stages without sign. Dzogchen in Nyingma tradition and Mahamudra in Kagyu or Drukpa Kagyu traditions. These are culminating non-conceptual meditations aimed at recognizing the primordial nature of reality, Rigpa in Tibetan, beyond subject and object. The type of meditation, these types of meditation are also called in scientific literature as non-dual awareness or open presence meditations. And in this slide, I will talk about the differences between Vajrayana versus Theravada training. Vajrayana training uses the body as well as its somatic and cognitive experiences as energy or fuel to get to higher state of consciousness. As it could be seen from the first quote, the body is the Buddha, sensation is the Buddha, cognition is the Buddha, mental formations are the Buddha. Its most salient feature is divinization of the body and its cognitive faculties, which are the basis of tantric practices. Body and cognition, those are vehicles to completion, to dissolution stages. Also, completion stages without sign, as Mahamudra or Dzogchen, as I mentioned in a previous slide, in Vajrayana training are performed after generation stages involving complex visualization. So here this conceptual visualization serves as a vehicle to the final dissolution stages. In contrast, in Theravada and Mahayana, the body is regarded as decaying and defiled, as in the second quote, the comfortable body is a container of suffering. According to these traditions, the body should be transcended and the mind, with all its cognitive processes, should be pacified and tranquilized. And what about scientific conceptualization of meditation? In 1982, Benson reported that meditation, he studied transcendental meditation, activated the parasympathetic nervous system, causing decrease in metabolism, respiratory rate, and blood pressure. In psychological terms, it means a state of deep relaxation or relaxation response. Since then, a lot of studies replicated Benson's findings with shamatha, vipassana, and mindfulness. For example, relaxation response kicks in just about 10-15 minutes of mindfulness practice, significantly reducing the stress. As a result of these studies, meditation has been largely conceptualized as a relaxation response, a special type of relaxation, not just any relaxation, during which a practitioner is deeply relaxed, but still can be highly alert. This type of alertness, which goes well with relaxation response, is called tonic alertness or vigilance. And it means that a person is able to stay alert or perform a relatively simple task for a long time without any distraction, what is called also sustained attention or vigilance in attention literature. And in terms of categorization, two broad categories of meditation practices were proposed: focused attention, such as shamatha, and open monitoring, such as vipassana or mindfulness. So while focused attention meditation requiring more focused attention, open monitoring meditation require more distributed attention. while focused attention versus open monitoring categorization is clearly useful since it allows to start some discussion about different types of meditation, the problem here is that Vajrayana styles of meditation, including Tantric Mahamudra, for example, I will talk later about it, they do not fit at all into this categorization. So clearly, there is a need for revised categorization of meditation. And this is a brief introduction to autonomic nervous system. This system is responsible for the control of internal organs, and it is considered by all medical science theorists to be outside the realm of conscious control. It has two branches, parasympathetic and sympathetic, which are antagonistic to each other. The more one of them is activated, the more the other is deactivated. So parasympathetic nervous system is associated with relaxation and rest. And sympathetic nervous system is involved in preparing the body to stress-related activities, also called fight or flight response. And then there is another state called arousal, which is in between the states dominated by parasympathetic and sympathetic influences. Arousal occurs when attention is drawn to a stressor because of its potential threat or novelty, and it is accompanied by the reduction of parasympathetic nervous system activity so that sympathetic nervous system response can be triggered quickly if it turns out to be necessary. So just to emphasize that arousal is not stress, but rather withdrawal from relaxation in preparation for flight or fight. Arousal is a state colloquially known as adrenaline rush experience. It is a special state of high wakefulness. Arousal is regulated by neurons that release a number of neurotransmitters, activation of which produces an increase in neural activity and subsequently heightened phasic alertness. So a few words about phasic alertness. Phasic alertness is a dramatic temporary boost in focused attention, resulting in heightened sensory capacity and readiness to respond to the threat. In contrast to tonic alertness, this is a temporary boost, not long-lasting. It is dramatic. A person can perform at unprecedented level. I put here on this slide everything on the scale of different states of consciousness to avoid the confusion between wakefulness and alertness. So arousal is a state of high wakefulness, while relaxation response is closer to sleep. Both state of relaxation and arousal could be accompanied by alertness, also a different kind of alertness. We have tonic alertness during relaxation response. As I mentioned, this is sustained attention or vigilance. And we have phasic alertness during arousal. Taking all this into account and that Vajrayana practices aim at achieving states of high wakefulness, the question then becomes whether Vajrayana practices can be more accurately conceptualized as an arousal response rather than a relaxation response. I broke down my talk into two parts. In the first part, I will present results on study 1, and the main goal of part 1 of my talk is to present research evidence that in fact Vajrayana practices could be more accurately described as arousal response accompanied by corresponding phasic alertness. In the second part of my talk, this would be recorded as a separate presentation. I will focus more on completion stages with and without sign, and specifically on my research on Tummo meditation, conducted at Gebchak Nunnery in Tibet, and also my recent study conducted in Bhutan, which compare neurophysiological correlates of Sutra Mahamudra with Tantric Mahamudra. The goal of study 1 was to contrast Theravada and Vajrayana meditative practices in terms of arousal versus relaxation. And also we wanted to re-examine focused attention versus open monitoring categorization. We used two practices from Vajrayana tradition, such as deity self-visualization as a focused meditation, focused attention meditation, and emptiness meditation from Dzogchen tradition. So the focus on empty nature of reality. And emptiness meditation was used as open monitoring types of meditation. As for Theravada, we also used two practices, kasina, which is a type of shamatha that requires focus on a visual object, and we chose this type of shamatha to control for visual aspects, since deity self-visualization also requires visualization. And then we use vipassana as open monitoring type of meditation. Our Theravada practitioners were long-term meditators from Thailand with an average of 8 years of meditation experience. And we had 9 Vajrayana practitioners from Sechin Monastery in Kathmandu with about 7.5 years of meditation experience. And these are Theravada practices, and specifically Kasina meditation, which requires concentration on different objects represented by color discs. And then Vipassana, which practitioners focus on their breath, but when attention wanders away, they're instructed to bring it back and recognize the content occupying the mind. And these are our Vajrayana meditations, specifically deity self-visualization, which was chosen as generation stage practice, and then emptiness meditation, which is a type of non-conceptual meditation, emptiness from Dzogchen tradition, in which a meditator aspires to achieve awareness devoid of any conceptualization. Modulations of autonomic nervous system are closely related to heart activity and heart rate variability, HRV. HRV is one of the main markers of autonomic nervous system activity. And it refers to the beat-to-beat alteration of the heart, or more simply to acceleration or deceleration of the heart rate. During HRV analysis, electrocardiographic EKG high frequency, HF-HRV, extracted, and the increase indicates parasympathetic activation, that is relaxation. And this is quite clear relationship. The higher the increase in HF, the higher parasympathetic activity. It's not that simple for arousal, although we can use HF decrease as indicator for arousal, but we also need to control for LF. Low frequency should not go up, as well as ratio, we need to control ratio LF to HF. In this study, we measured EKG to investigate our hypothesis that Theravada practices cause parasympathetic activity and Vajrayana practices cause arousal. We also collected EEG electroencephalographic data to compare brain dynamics of Vajrayana versus Theravada practitioners. And finally, to compare cognitive performance of the practitioners before and immediately after their meditations, we administered to them 2 computerized working memory tests which required focused attention. The diagram in the bottom left illustrates the sequence of the practices. Theravada practitioners first perform Kasina and then Vipassana, and for Vajrayana, first deity, self-visualization, and then emptiness, since this is how these practitioners usually perform these meditations. And here are the results of our HRV analysis. The vertical axis represents HF-HRV, and horizontal axis represents different types of meditative practices. The data above the horizontal axis mean relaxation and below arousal. As you can see, while Kasina does not show any particular changes, Vipassana, this is light blue color, shows significant relaxation response. This is significant increase in HF. Now, if you look at deity and emptiness, these red columns, you can see significant decrease in HF. So actually this means arousal. We also control for LF, low frequency, and the ratio. So all these HRV indicators indicate a state of arousal. And since emptiness was performed after deity self-visualization, and there were no significant changes in HF from deity to emptiness, it seems that emptiness meditation does not generate arousal by itself, but rather maintain arousal produced by deity. These are the results of EEG analysis. Each graph shows how the power of particular frequency band, delta, alpha, beta, and gamma changed during each of the meditative practices. I will go in more detail about EEG results in experiment 3, in study 3, in the second part of my talk, but here I want to emphasize a few things. The first one, if you look at the results for gamma power, you can see very clear difference between Vajrayana and Theravada styles of meditation. You see very clear, very significant decrease of gamma power during deity and emptiness meditations. This is very different from all EEG literature so far, which reported increases of gamma power for different meditative practices, in particular for Vipassana, not decreases. And I will return to this point later. Second interesting finding is that for each frequency band, the graphs show very different neural dynamics for Vajrayana versus Theravada practices. For example, it is the most significant decrease in both delta and beta power for Vajrayana than for Theravada practices, and quite the opposite pattern for alpha and gamma power. These are the results for cognitive tasks. Mental rotation and visual working memory both require focused attention. These are computerized tasks. During mental rotation task, subjects are shown two shapes, and they ask to rotate them mentally into alignment and indicate whether these shapes identical or mirror reversed after they rotated them into alignment. And during visual memory task, they shown an array of 6 objects. After 4 seconds, this display disappears, and they shown another object and asked to which from the 6 objects in the previous array this object corresponds to. So these are the results, and vertical axis indicates efficiency, how many items are solved correctly per unit of time. And horizontal axis represents different meditative practices. First, I plotted Deity and Kasina, represented focused attention practices according to focused attention versus open monitoring categorization, and then emptiness and Vipassana, representing open monitoring meditations. As you can see on these graphs, the results showed that dramatic improvements are observed only after Vajrayana types of meditation, but not after Theravada. Few things we can conclude from here. First, phasic alertness is only observed after Vajrayana practices. Usually it is very difficult to get any improvement on these tasks, since as any focused attention tasks, they reflect capacity of our attentional system, and in some way represent the level of intelligence. So the dramatic improvements after Vajrayana are more than impressive. These participants perform really like geniuses, supporting our hypothesis that Vajrayana, but not Theravada practitioners, experience a state of arousal and corresponding phasic alertness. By the way, as the results of my other research showed, these improvements are washing out and performance returned to baseline after around 30-45 minutes of rest. So these are in fact temporary improvements. Second, focused attention versus open categorization is again not supported. Actually, both Kasina and Vipassana do not show any improvements in focused attention. So technically, shamatha is not a focused attention. Both Kasina and Vipassana most likely tap vigilance, attentional network, sustained attention, not a focused attention. And finally, for emptiness meditation, it again looks like this meditation does not produce a state of arousal and phasic alertness, but just maintains the arousal produced by deity. The effect is washing out during emptiness. So you can see 2 stars for deity. So this is very significant improvement, and it remains significant, but not at the same level during emptiness meditation. So what can we conclude from this study? First, there is no support for conceptualization of meditation as relaxation response. And also focused attention versus open monitoring categorization should also be revised. Whereas Theravada practices, in fact, can be described as a relaxation response, Vajrayana practices represent an arousal response, which is quite the opposite to relaxation. Also, the results of this study demonstrate that generation stages of Vajrayana, they generate the state of arousal and related phasic alertness. And it seems that this arousal is later employed in emptiness meditation. In other words, it looks like generation stages generate high level of wakefulness to be used subsequently in completion without sign stages. At the cognitive level, arousal and phasic alertness lead to a very exceptional states, which are called enhanced cognitive states, akin to the state of flow in which a person experiences dramatic enhancement of attentional and perceptual capacities and perform at unprecedented level. These states of flow were reported by people of creative professions such as visual artists, musicians, chess players, and we know that these states are also characterized by arousal, and I conducted a few other studies showing very similar neurophysiological correlates of the state of flow and generation stages of Vajrayana meditations. So it might be an interesting connection between generation stages and these exceptional performance with human performance research. And I would be really interested in discussion at this conference, for example, how these generation stages could be used as a practice to train people to access a state of flow in a very controlled way, such as it could be done by experienced Vajrayana meditators. Thank you, and I will continue my presentation in part 2.